have clients who come and complain and just be like, why are they here, right? Like, I clearly have better content. I am clearly a better source. That things were in a state that I hadn't seen them in a while. So, you look at that dynamic and it's like, this system is kind of broken. And if you take that micro example of US News and apply it to the web in general, of just like, hey, people are doing stuff to sort of fudge things so that they can look better and be better on search, but users aren't aware of that happening. No one's screaming at the rooftops about like, McDonald's is great, I love it. I mean, maybe there are a few, but that's not going to be it. But if you get the right voice, the right content, the right originality, you're going to convert the right people, the right fans. They become your marketing army, essentially. And the long-term equation there is that those people will wind up then telling enough people, infecting enough people, and then suddenly you do have a brand. If you're doing anything which is supposed to have a voice or a personality or is supposed to represent your brand, you shouldn't be using generative content. Full stop.
Welcome to the DesignRush podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Today we have the privilege of hosting a remarkable personality in the world of SEO and digital marketing, AJ Kohn. AJ is the brain behind the insightful and much followed blog, Blind 5-Year-Old, an avenue where he shares his extensive knowledge and unique perspective on SEO. In our conversation today, we'll delve into AJ's journey, the story behind Blind 5-Year-Old, and his tips and tricks in the world of search engine algorithms and digital marketing strategies. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more engaging discussions with industry leaders like AJ. Let's get into it. AJ, once again, a very warm welcome to the DesignRush podcast. We are very excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Now, AJ, just before we dive into, the nitty gritty of the world of SEO, I'd just like to take a moment to get to know you a little bit better. So could you start by introducing yourself to our listeners and just share a little bit about what it is that you do professionally?
Sure. My name is AJ Kohn. I run sort of, I guess, a boutique agency, solo practice called Blind 5-Year-Old, which really specializes in very large B2C SEO. My background is probably a little different than a lot of SEOs who often come from technical backgrounds first. My background is actually in marketing and advertising first. So I was a marketing major, worked in advertising for a couple of years before I got into internet marketing, and then finally made my way to SEO.
Okay. So what was it that initially, made you want to jump from marketing over to SEO? Was there something that really sparked your interest there?
I was working at a company called Libris, which is a used, rare, and out-of-print sort of book marketplace where independent booksellers can sell. And I was in charge of paid search at the time. And this was a long time ago where you would pay, a couple pennies for a click. And I was crushing it, huge amount of paid search, lots of spreadsheets, bidding on every author, every book title, just on and on and on. And then the day came where they started to raise prices. And Google was like, I think we can make some more money at this paid search thing. And the prices went up. And that's when I started to look into SEO and was like, well, maybe we shouldn't pay for this. Let's get this for free. And that was the beginning, 20 years ago or something, just sort of looking at SEO and reading who was doing it and what they were doing. But this was, Internet 1.0 days, back when there were Google dances and fun named updates and all sorts of stuff. But that was the impetus, essentially. It was like, prices are going up. This is probably not a good place to be. Let's, instead of paying for it, let's see if we can get it for free.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now your blog, Blind 5-Year-Old, has quite a unique name and also an equally compelling approach to SEO. Can you tell us a little bit about what sparked the creation of this blog and what ignited your passion for SEO that much that you wanted to write a blog about it?
Yeah, so Blind 5-Year-Old was my attempt to describe back then how search engines, how to treat search engines, essentially. So I told people, think of them as blind 5-year-olds, which meant like they really can't see your site. They don't know, like they're not looking at it. They can't understand that. And like a 5-year-old, you need to be very direct. And you probably need to repeat yourself a couple times before they do the thing that you want them to do. Jimmy, go and put your clothes on. Jimmy, I need you to go upstairs and put your clothes on. Jimmy, go upstairs and put your clothes on, right? Like, if you don't do that, like, they just aren't going to do it. They're going to wander off and they're not going to understand what they're going to do. And so it was really about, keep it simple, stupid for search engines. Big fan of Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think. And so I always tell people, don't make Google think. Like, make it easy for them. And that was the impetus. Back in the day, it was kind of funny. I named it, and then I found a quote from Matt Cutts, who was a figure of lore within the SEO community. He was a Googler who was quite pivotal in our industry. And he had written and said that you can think of Google as a hyperactive 4-year-old. And I was like, well, okay. Like, I think I hit it pretty well then. If he's talking about it like that, then I think I probably named it pretty well. The blog was two things when I started, and it was branding. I needed to have a brand and make a name for myself in the industry, and back then blogs were the way to do it. Wish it was the same today, but it's not. Hopefully, maybe we can bring blogging back. But it was, in the first year or two that I had my practice, I spent 50% of my time on brand building and 50% of my time on client work for about 2 years. And so it was all about writing, good content and socializing it and getting out there. My approach to the blog and what I write about still today is I don't want to write a Me Too post. If I'm going to write, I'm going to write either about how I did something, like literally it's me documenting like, hey, I won't write it like that, but it's literally like I did this thing to just figure out if I could do it and what it's gonna work or not, and then I write about it. And the other one is just opinion pieces where if the industry was thinking one way, I would go and say like, I don't think so, and I'd write about that. Not to be contradictory just to be contradictory, but if I felt something was different, and I often do because I think I have a slightly different perspective on things, that I would write about it and get discussion and whatnot, and that was that. So that was the genesis of the blog and the name and the reason why I got into writing. I love writing as well. I'm a big reader, love writing, so something that I really took to and enjoyed making posts that were both informative but entertaining as well. And that's the same thing with my decks. My decks are full of, if I'm going to stand up and talk to somebody, they're going to be memes. They're going to be lots of memes.
On the notes of SEO, which is something that I want to pivot to now, just talking more about, how SEOs and businesses can better navigate like the ever-changing landscape, not to sound too much of like ChatGPT in saying that, but the ever-changing landscape of SEO, right? So I know that last year you wrote a blog post titled "It's Good Enough." which is something that Lily Ray also shared, which also prompted me to check it out, which was very interesting blog post. Now, just for our unfamiliar audience, once again, can you maybe just give us an overview of what the main message was of that blog post, and also what prompted you to write it in the first place?
Yeah, so my Goog Enough piece was, the main thrust of that piece was that the search results have declined in quality. And that a lot of what is going on is larger brands have figured out what is going on, how they can rank, and because there's this brand bias that is in the algorithm, they can go out and just hyper optimize and take over. So you wind up with somebody like Forbes ranking for the best VPN service, which I just don't think they're the best result for that, right? Forbes is a business magazine originally. I mean, they really don't do that much anymore, but I think that was a large part of it, of just why are we seeing these results outranking. I have clients who come and complain and just be like, why are they here, right? Like, I clearly have better content. I am clearly a better source. And they're right. And I keep telling clients, just hold on, hold on. It'll work itself out. And it got to a point where I could tell it was not going to get worked out. That things were in a state that I hadn't seen them in a while. So I dove in. I had a lot of other threads in there about how I think users have a hard time understanding if the content that they're viewing is truly good or not. They are fooled by the brand a lot of times. So it's like, oh, it's from U.S. News and World Report. They're a good brand, so this must be good. Probably not. In their areas, and I talked about it. Even their college rankings have come under fire because so many of the sites were fudging their data so that they would do better on that. So you look at that dynamic and it's like, this system is kind of broken. And if you take that micro example of US News and apply it to the web in general, of just like, hey, people are doing stuff to sort of fudge things so that they can look better and be better on search, but users aren't aware of that happening. And so they're just clicking, and that's what you wind up with. So that was a large part of what I had there. There's another part, obviously, which was the dark forest theory, which is people are retreating away from the internet, from the web, into places which are sort of inaccessible, whether that's Discord or Slack or just private chats or Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever, wherever you are. There's a ton of that, and I think there is a lot of truth to that. And I think we might talk a little bit about it, but I think it's also the reason why Google's stance on generative content might be what it is today, because there's just not a lot more content out there for them. People have gone to social. They've gone to Twitter, whatever Elon's calling it today, and Instagram and TikTok, and as I said, to Discord and Slack and all these places. They're not blogging. They're not creating a site just because it's, I want to have a site, and they don't do that. Everybody wants to cash in. So if they're going to create a site, it's going to be, okay, it needs to rank for some things and make some money and do that. So I think that's part of the reason you see they're sort of tacked on AI. But the post overall was just to try to prod the industry. I do know people at Google, Danny Sullivan and a couple other people. So not to say that I'm a super influencer, but I have at least enough sort of history and I guess credit to what I've done in the past that they'll at least look at it and take me seriously. And I think it accomplished that.
You should absolutely give yourself more credit than that, AJ, for sure. Um, Look, I agree. Obviously, I agree with everything that you're saying. Um, but I did want to just backtrack a little bit and ask you about, when you're saying that there's these brands that are fudging up their data and all of that to rank higher for things that they have no business ranking for, right? Um, what is the solution to that? Like, is there anything that, say, Google can do to stop that from happening? I mean, are there things that's happening right now to try and fix what's potentially just spam, or what is the solution to all of this?
Um, they are working on it. I do know that. They've been public about that, in talking about the fact that they do see the problems. They are going to work on it. Um, it's a complex problem. It is, I think, what I can say. It is not straightforward. You don't want to. You could take an approach of like, hey, topical expertise. If you're outside of your topical expertise, we're going to demote you, and so you don't rank. The real problem is that you do that, you kind of penalize people who do start to actually get more, expand their breadth and to do that. So it kind of does not help the innovation that some brands might actually engage in, or new sites, which then just can't get through that. So I think it's tough. I think the click signals that they use just have to be balanced better, right? They trust users very much to guide their journey, and the users are not aware that this isn't the best content. I talk about it. I probably cut it from the piece. I did talk about fast food content. I think what you're finding is much of what is being served up is McDonald's and Starbucks. The problem is that they're pretty popular brands and pretty popular places. People do go there. I don't think anybody would say it's the best coffee or the best food, but they are
Good enough.
Good enough. They're good enough. Exactly. And that's the problem. And so I kind of have challenged Google to say, like, if you want to be, good enough and just serve that up, that's fine. But I don't think that's what Google really wants. They want to give you the best results. And that's just not what is here, right? You're not getting the French Laundry. You're not getting fine dining. You're getting McDonald's. And I don't think that's what they want. And so they need to figure out a way to sort of dial that back in to do that. As I said, I think there are fewer results like that than there used to be, and that does make it more difficult. And you are talking about, I cut this, but I made a quip, the way it's going, it's going to be Fast and the Furious 20, and it's going to be Vin Diesel in a wheelchair, going down and solving something, right? Like, that's what America wants, right? Like, okay, Fast 10, like, okay, all right, and I'm not saying it's an awful movie, but it's not an Oscar movie, right?
I mean, it's not awful, but it for sure could have stopped at some point. No, like, how much more can we really do? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, is there nothing original anymore, right? Which is, I think it applies to search for sure, because even like I write a few like news articles and stuff like that, right? I mean, even just coming up with a tagline or a title for something is like the hardest thing, because it needs to like rank for SEO, but it still needs to, be good and engaging and try to hook people, right?
Yep.
But it's like the things that rank or feel like they rank the highest, and when you test it out on, like Title Case Checker or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Their SEO scores are great, but it's just like every other title. So, like, in saying something like that, right? Sorry, I've just gone into a little bit of rant here, but in saying something like that, where do you balance that then? Like, how do you balance the ranking of something, but still have something that's original? Like, what is your advice on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I I still believe that a true voice in that content, that has some originality, that has a personality, will win in the end. Um, it will even rank better in the end. It's not right now. It hasn't for the last year, maybe even 16 months now. Um, but I do feel like at some point it will. Um, More importantly, uh, I think you get customers. So, like, one of the things that I talk about on my blog a couple times is Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans, which was really for like musicians or independent artists, and basically saying all you need is 1,000 true fans to keep you going, to keep you afloat, right? To have that going. And a true fan is not just like following. It's like someone who's like, hey, you just put out something, I'm gonna shout it to the rafters and talk about it. And I took that to my work and said, every piece of content that you write, you're trying to convert people into a true fan, right? You want a true fan. You're not going to do that with some mid content, which is just generic and what have you. Like, no one's screaming at the rooftops about like McDonald's is great. I love it. I mean, maybe there are a few, but that's not going to be it. But if you get the right voice, the right content, the right originality, you're going to convert the right people, the right fans. They become your marketing army, essentially. And that's, to me, still important for business, right? And the long-term equation there is that those people will wind up then telling enough people, infecting enough people, and then suddenly you do have a brand. Your brand rises, people start clicking on you more, and then you can compete with the other stuff, which is just sort of mid but might have a bigger brand. So I'm still bullish on that. I still think it's super important. It is difficult to convince people to toe that line in the current environment. I'll be honest. It's rough. But I'm still a believer.
I have to say, I agree with you on that. I think that there is something to be said for still being original because, yeah, I think why do everything the same as everybody else if you're trying to stand out in any market, right?
Yep.
In any case, so just to get back to some of the comments from other SEOs that we've had on the show, we also know that Lily Ray recently commented on the declining quality of Google search results. And, she said that it was like the worst that she's seen in her 14-year career. What is your take on this observation?
I mean, I think she's not wrong. Search has gotten pretty bad. And she's actually stumbled on some areas where search spam has really overwhelmed a lot of queries. I think what I would say is these are similar events. It's sort of the pendulum that you find in search. Way back in the day, 20 plus years ago, it was the Florida update, which completely shook up everything. Then there was Panda, which was about 10 years ago, which took on thin content, basically people writing 5 different ways about, how to boil water, right? And content farms being a real problem and showing up and ranking well. And they fixed it, right? They released Panda, and sites like eHow suddenly were like, gone, basically. And, here we are. There's another wave of this, and we've got another bad set of search results. I think you're probably looking at just another correction at some point, where they have to go in and say, okay, like we get it. We gotta fix this. I think it'll be a little bit more difficult this time, only because the organization is more mature. it's more complex, both from a technical standpoint and also from a business infrastructure standpoint, right? I just don't think things get done as quickly as they used to. I think just things take more time. Back in Florida days, like, it was cowboy time over at Google. Like, you could just do stuff. And I think even during the Panda update, it was more still, they could get stuff done quick. Like, hey, we got to make this change. Let's do it. I don't think they're in that environment now. It just doesn't feel like they can move at that speed. And so I think you'll see it'll take a little bit of time, but I think it's there. I think Lily was good at identifying that there is a lot of search spam that is ranking. I think that dovetails with my sort of idea that there's just less good content out there. And so there are some queries where Google's like, well, I don't know, like, there's only like 2 sites, legit sites that we have. So if you've got search spam for those queries, like, it's going to rank because, there's nothing else out there, right? And smart black hat SEOs know that, where those cracks are. And it's like, okay. And you fill enough of those long tail cracks, it adds up pretty quick.
Okay, so you said that we are kind of drawing closer to a fix for this, right? Do you think that we'll see a fix for that, like for all of the spammy stuff and everything this year? Or is this like a question of like how long is a piece of string, really?
I think we'll see it this year. I don't think it's going to be one big update like it used to. I think it'll be a bunch of smaller updates over time. I'm a little surprised we didn't see something more in January, to be honest. But I would predict that we'll have something in February. And I would not be surprised if there was a time last year where it was like 5 updates in a row, like update, and then 2 days later, oh no, another one, and then a week later, oh, did we mention this one? And I was like, what is going on, right? And I think I don't know if we'll see something like that, but I think you will see a drumbeat of launches of them trying to address a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think even Lily said so, but I think I remember a few people, especially SEOs, of course, that were like, last year they were like, oh God, another update. And now they're like, please, another update.
I mean, selfishly for me, I don't mind updates. I mean, they're good for business, to be honest, right? If there's an update, everybody needs help, one way or the other, right? And I view any update as an A/B test, because I think most SEO A/B tests in isolation are pretty unsatisfying and not particularly good. So I like to tell people, let's do as much as we can between updates, and when the update happens, we'll know if we did the right things, right? So I'm a fan. I like them. Sometimes they don't. One of the reasons why I get along with Googlers is I don't need my clients to win. I mean, I like them to win, but I usually complain when I feel like the results are objectively not good, right? Like, it's not that my client's not winning. It's like, these results are not good, right? There's a problem here. And so I think that's the key here, is that I think we'll see them try and make them objectively better. Whether or not that helps clients or not, we'll find out.
Okay, so just moving on a little bit as well. We had Daniel Foley-Carter on the show fairly recently as well. And he emphasized that SEOs shift to, focus on user needs rather than search engines, predicting this, especially trend to intensify in 2024. How do you see this impacting SEO strategies and businesses' approach to online content this year?
I mean, to be honest, I've done this my entire career, this is how, like, I tell people SEO is a user-facing discipline. Our goal is to understand the syntax of how people search and the intent behind it, and to match that with content that satisfies that intent. I knew from reading patents and other types of things that they were using click signals, long clicks, short clicks, last clicks. These are all things that Google looks at. It is the metric that they look at. Satisfaction, right? It's a proxy for satisfaction. I wrote about pogo sticking probably 15 years ago. A bad sign is like they go to your site and they're there for 30 seconds and they bounce back to the search result and they pick something else. Like, this is what they watch. So I've always been in the face of product teams in UX, which, some people are okay with it. Some people don't like me getting uppity. But I am very clear that it's not just, because search engines they're optimizing for users, right? So we should be optimizing for users. Like, when we do that, we are optimizing for search engines. Now, there's a whole technical side of it, which is different, and you still need to have that done. So that is still for search engines. But at the end of the day, you need to understand why people are searching, how they're searching, match it with content, and make sure that they have a satisfying experience. It is about UX. I think I wrote a post, SEO and UX are like, chocolate and peanut butter, right? Like they go great together, right? Like, that's how it should be. But many SEOs haven't taken that approach for a long time, where it's like, all they care about is like ranking, and I get rank and they get to the page. I've just always been like, that's not going to work. Like, we need them to get to the page and enjoy that content. And what is it doing for the business? Did they convert? Did they sign up? Did we get an email address? Can we remarket to them? Like, what is it? So if it gets more SEOs to think more holistically about the process, I think it's a good thing. I think it's also nice if SEOs start to take a more active role on product and UX. I think that's just good for the industry, instead of this silo of like, oh, you're just those SEO weirdos who, do that thing with search and whatever, right? So I think that's generally what I would say. So whether that accelerates or not, I don't know. But 100%, that's how it works. It's how it's worked for 20 years. And it's only recently that it's finally been confirmed that that's how it works. But I wrote about it, I think 10, 12 years ago, where I said, like, this is and got pilloried for it in the community in the large part, right? You're wrong. They said they don't. Okay, but they do. And sure enough, they do. That's fine. But that's how I've managed my clients and my recommendations since the beginning, which is just, you can't just be, I think I have a lot of food analogies. I made the thing like, I'm not a burger flipper, I'm a chef, right? And as a chef, I want to know the ingredients. I want the decor has to be right. It has to look good. The table settings, the servers have to be good and be trained, and the whole, like, everything, right? It's not just, here's some food. So that's the SEO that I practice and have practiced, and thankfully it's paid off. Most clients who follow that do well, and that has been the secret sauce in large respects.
Okay. Now, I also know that Daniel highlighted the importance of machine learning and behavioral data in SEO. Do you see this as a crucial area of focus for SEO professionals? And, how should they adapt to this shift as well?
I don't think it's shifted. I think maybe it's a realization by many professionals that they're doing this. But click signals are a very large part of the algorithm. They are watching what we do in aggregate and saying like, okay, what is this, and how is it working? And so it does come down to looking at it. Now, the real issue that we get to is, how do you measure that satisfaction, right? How do you sort of understand whether or not that is a long click or a last click, or did they go back to the search result and pick something else, or reformulate their query, which is also a bad sign. So I'll say this, it's a very difficult topic, because you're really trying to figure out what the proxy should be. Like, is it time on page? Did they get to the bottom of the page? Did they interact with something? Did they get to multiple pages on your site? Like, what is it that is a telltale signal that this was a satisfying result for them? Obviously, conversion is a satisfaction signal, but not everybody's converting, but they could still be satisfied. So I work with a lot of clients about trying to come up with a long click metric, which is different for every site, because it's different, products, different engagements, and it's not easy. But I think it's the important work that has to happen, and it's really about product market fit. We're going to sort of stray into product again, where you're really trying to understand, hey, if they searched for this, did I solve their problem? Were they satisfied? Did they get that? So one of the things that I always tell people, because someone's like, oh, bounce rate, just look at bounce rate. I'm like, yeah, but then look at Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow has like a 95% bounce rate, because if you're a coder and you've got a problem, you type in some error code and there's Stack Overflow, and it's like, oh, there you go, that's how it's done, and they're gone. So your bounce rate's high, but they were super satisfied, right? It's like, yep, didn't need to go anywhere else. So very difficult, a lot of nuance when you're looking at that. Same thing if you're talking about number of like interactions or pages. Like, that could be a good sign, they're engaged, or it could be a bad sign, like, your site is screwy and, it's tough to navigate. And so it's hard for people to get to where they want to go. So difficult and nuanced, which makes it really tough for SEO professionals, in my opinion. Anytime nuance comes in, or anybody, frankly, it's just a tough place to be. So I will say UX teams are probably the best people to ally with in this regard, where they're really like, hey, I want to make this a great experience. And so if you cozy up with them, you can really get a lot done to sort of move the ball forward and say, this is going to help SEO. And that is the tougher thing to pitch to people, which is like, if this is a more satisfying experience, over time, you will rank better. The problem is that the time period for that is not short. It's usually a pretty long time period, where it could be up to 90 days before you see any difference in ranking based on a better UX.
90 days? That's not long at all.
Well, I agree.
I don't feel
agree.
like that's a very long time to have to wait. At the end of the day, I think you're saying something very valuable here, because I think people don't give enough credit to UI UX, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, the end user is the person that you want to make happy, right? If they're jumping onto a website that maybe, I've had that personally, where I've gone onto Google, I've typed in something that I want to see, and the search results at the top are crap. And, I don't get what I'm looking for right there and then. And so, it might be from these big publishers, or it might just be buggy websites or something, or there's just like thousands of ads and pop-ups everywhere, and it's just like, what is going on? And that's where they really don't care about UI UX. And I also think that people aren't optimizing for mobile anymore either, or as much as they should be, at least.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Even I struggle with it. Like, my default is looking at the desktop when I'm doing analysis, and I have to tell myself, like, no, get the inspector up and start looking at it like mobile so that I can really see what it looks like, because that is the more important experience today. And yeah, that mobile experience can be pretty awful. I think one of the things that I've talked to a couple people about is it feels like users have learned to hold their nose a lot. Like, they've just like, this is what I got to get through to get to this content. And I don't think that is good for anybody, but, and that's the problem with click signals, is like, I think we've gotten to a level of maturity with the internet and how people are accessing it, that they're just sort of like, this is what you got to deal with, right? Like, all these ads, whatever. So they just try and like get through it, instead of kind of voting with their clicks with like, I don't want to see this, I want to see something better. And we don't see that. And my version is Google needs to be more proactive and say, like, okay, if users aren't going to give us the right signal, meaning they're holding their nose and saying it's an awful experience, but I'll wade through it, right? If they're doing that, Google needs to figure out a way to like say, okay, we need to figure out how not to use that part of the signal so that those sites don't do well. And you do see some of that with like the Core Web Vitals, with like the CLS, which is cumulative layout shift, which was like, hey, we don't want sites which are shifting content all around while you're on the page, right? But I don't think they've been super aggressive there. And I'd like them to be. I'd like sites that aren't, an ad on every single, thing, place and popping up and autoplay and etc. But, I get to a lot of these sites in the top 3 results, right? Unfortunately. So I'm a big fan of UX and satisfying users. Don't love the word delight users. That just irks me. But I do believe that there's a really strong presence here for good UX. That the one with better user experience will usually wind up winning. Also, good marketing. I will say, I work with some people, and their marketing is a huge part of it. And during every downturn, marketers are the first to go during a downturn. But very important to get the brand out there and ensure that you're doing the most to sort of, what's your unique selling proposition and all those types of things. Super important. And something which, again, I coach a lot of clients on that, to sort of say, hey, you're going up against a Goliath here. What are we going to do? Like, how are you making yourself different and positioning yourself? Because that's the only way you're going to get, you're going to win long term, is sort of showing why they shouldn't go to Amazon, but instead go to your e-commerce, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think trying to get yourself to rank and be successful as a business needs to be a well-oiled machine at the end of the day, from start to finish. We also had another interview with Cody Schneider, and we discussed, how AI tools are revolutionizing content creation and potentially then impacting SEO. Now, considering the use of AI and creating diverse content formats, which we kind of said earlier in this conversation we were going to discuss a little bit, right? What is your perspective on balancing AI-generated content with maintaining a brand's authenticity?
I think if you're doing anything which is supposed to have a voice or a personality or is supposed to represent your brand, you shouldn't be using generative content. Full stop. Probably not a popular opinion, but I just don't think that that's a good thing for your brand long term. I have spoken to a lot of people who there's no soul in the generative content. And I think people are unable to vocalize that, but they get it, they feel it. And so if you're looking for critical stuff, article writing or that kind of stuff, I wouldn't use generative. There are good uses for generative content. If you need, just a summary for like a page, if you want alt text for your images, another good one. I know I've used generative text to rewrite titles for really bad titles on UGC sites. If it's just like cool picture and whatever, and it's like, okay, that's not going to help. So what is the picture? Let's write a better title. And generative's good at that. And we're never going to do that at scale at some of the sites that I work at where we have billions of URLs. It's just not going to happen. So those are good. And I don't mind that. I think the better use of AI would be getting content that wouldn't be available otherwise, meaning the one that I like to use the most is school board meeting minutes. People in communities are actually pretty interested in school board meeting minutes, but there's no newspaper who can dedicate someone to cover school board meeting and like write an article about it. But you can point some generative, an LLM at it and say like, look at the school board meeting minutes and create a story based on what happened there. Like that is net new content that would not be available with the use of AI. I think that's a great use of it. It's unfortunate that is not the way most people are using it. Most people are using it to be like, write me a post about the 10 best, yoga apps. And it's like, as the kids like to say today, it's going to be mid, right? It's going to be mid because any of these things it's always looking for the most probable next word, which means you're always going to get the sort of most generic accepted version of that. So there is no expertise. You're just getting, McDonald's. You're getting Soylent Green is what we're getting. So it's not good. So good places to use it, but I would never, and I tell clients I would never do it in that way. Now, I will say, if you want to be an internet pirate, you can just spin up sites with generative content and they will rank and if you've got ads on it, you will make money. I've seen it. There's no question about it. So there's a industry out there, and I think that industry is going to be around for at least a year before that door closes. So it's unfortunate, but and I think it makes it difficult for SEOs to toe the line with clients to say like, no, don't do that. When they turn around and it's like, look at these jackasses. That's clearly just from ChatGPT. What's going on? Hello. So very difficult. But with all the lawsuits going on and everything else, I'm still very, very bullish on actual writing and a voice and a personality being important for a brand and still the winning solution for the long term. If you're a company that's looking for quarterly results and wants to see, that pop, you're probably going to get sucked into the generative vortex and start doing that stuff, which will probably work for a while until it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think there is much sustainability there because I think at some point things are going to start looking the same, feeling the same, reading the same. There's not going to really be a hell of a lot of things that differentiate you between everybody else, right? Which is exactly like you said, where your brand voice comes in and why you need to work at it so meticulously.
I also think that if Google doesn't figure that out and sees just how same everything is, why would I use Google instead of just going to ChatGPT? Like, I'm going to get the same result, right, from them without all the ad crap. Like, so for me, and I mentioned that in my Google Enough piece, it's like, if all the results are just mid and the same crap that I could get on ChatGPT, why would I not just do that and not do that? Or go to Reddit, which, lots of people do now. So that's definitely an issue. Super interesting area. And as I said, I think Google was hoping that people would use this in more inventive ways, but we have not.
It's actually scary if you think about it. At the end of the day, if people are like, well, we don't need to go to websites anymore, we're just going to use ChatGPT or whatever, what does that mean for businesses? And what does that mean for people who do run blogs? And what does that mean for people, for Wikipedia or any really big like sources where you go to get really expert insights on something? Like, what?
It is. It's a little terrifying. I know in talking to a couple of people, Google still, they are worried about the open web, right? And it flourishing. And I'm not sure they have a super solution right now. But it is an issue where, and for them, it's even an issue because if it's all generative content, if you try and train an LLM on generative content, it's model collapse. It doesn't work. And so I think we're already closing in, and if the New York Times and the recording industry, they pissed off the recording industry, which I have some background in that. Not good people to piss off. Those people are woo. And so I think it'll take some time, but I completely agree. It's a scary proposition. As I said, I think Google needs to figure out that, we need to fix this quicker, because at some point people will be like, well, if it's the same on Google as it is on ChatGPT, but I don't have to wade through all of the ads, I'll just do ChatGPT. And then suddenly Google's hurting, and then sites are hurting. More sites go down because they can't sustain themselves. I mean, it gets scary pretty quick.
Yeah, until the day that ChatGPT actually does include ads. I mean, even Netflix is doing it now. But anyway, that's a whole other can of beans. Okay, so just shifting now a little bit from, AI and SEO and all of that stuff and how terrifying all of that sounds to me. How do you think that directories and B2B marketplaces, like, say, for instance, DesignRush, impact SEO strategies and online visibility for businesses?
I mean, I think if you are a business and you're looking for, you want to be everywhere. I mean, for me, with clients, it's always when your user is, on social, you want to be in front of them. When they're searching on Google, you want to be in front of them. When you want to be on all the directories. If they're looking at a directory, if they're looking at a review site, whatever it is, you want to be everywhere your customer is, so that no matter where they turn, they see you, they see your brand. It's difficult to get away from them, right? And this is sort of my marketing background. It's just sort of I believe in saturation marketing. I've done it, I've seen it. I had to do research on it for an ad agency who wanted to sponsor a NASCAR. And it's sort of someone's done the research that says how much getting your brand in front of a television audience, what it's worth per second. That's the kind of stuff that works. And in NASCAR back in the day, it was when they had the Gatorade on the car, I think they sold 600% more Gatorade in the South. I mean, it was just nuts. So this stuff works. And it works online too. And I think for whatever reason, many marketers have not understood the power of branding and being everywhere online like they do offline. like offline, they're like, oh, hey, sponsorships or this or that or billboards, yes. But you talk about it online, they're like, well, what's the ROI on that? And it was like, really? Like, we're talking about this? Like, well, okay, what's the ROI of that billboard? And they'll go, well, that's, Now, the thing is, there are people who can tell you what the ROI is on that billboard. Online, we just haven't gotten very good at that, and it's getting more difficult now with the cookie sort of apocalypse coming up and the privacy stuff. And so, you're back to, the old, advertising / marketing adage of like, I know I'm wasting 50% of my ad spend, I just don't know which half, right? But being on marketplaces like that, I think is huge. You need to do that. You need to be everywhere your customer is going to be.
How would you say the increase in spam and low quality content has affected, current SEO strategies?
I think it's definitely affected it, in that sometimes you'll see it rank and it just makes, it's distracting, right? For someone who's like, we don't want to do it that way, and I continually, then it's like, but look at them and they're ranking, and shouldn't we do? And it's like, and so I would say, people are experimenting. Like, I do have people, sometimes, even against my recommendations, who are experimenting with generative content and doing different things. And I can see what works and what doesn't and all that sort of stuff. So it is doing that. I would say it is, most executive teams are very interested in it, right? Because, we can get all this content and rank and not have to pay a bunch of writers and editors, and like, they are very, very eager. And so it does make it difficult to hold that back over time. And I think the strategies have changed for some in that way. But the real issue there is just trying to keep people focused, right? I mean, it's just really trying to keep them on the path of staying with the right projects, staying with real content. I do a lot of Q&A content, and Q&A you would think would be good with generative content, but I'm like, I want someone to write it. And when you do much better. Like, I've seen that. And so it's a little tough. It's just a lot of work. It's a lot more work to like hold back people's enthusiasm for cheap content that I don't have to pay for, that will work. And basically saying, no, like, don't do that. So that's the strategy. I don't think it's changed my strategies that much, unless, as I said, you want to be an internet pirate for the next year, go for it, right? Like, I mean, it's just like, hey, if you have a niche and you're like, okay, I'm just going to spin up some generative content and make my money, and when it gets burned, and that's done, I can't blame people for doing that. But it's not very fulfilling, other than inflating your bank account, which, fine thing to do.
Which some might argue is very fulfilling.
Yeah, that's right. Something like fulfilling. Thank you.
Exactly.
Vacation in Hawaii, anybody? Yeah. So I think I think there are definitely, that's one thing I will say. There's absolutely a strategy right now for people who want it, which is, grip it and rip it. Just, okay, we're gonna, here's the site, we're gonna put a whole bunch of generative on it. Usually you're buying an old domain, right? You buy a domain which has some authority, has a corpus of content, and then you just start to put some junk around it and rank. Don't love it, but it's working. You can make money. So I think that's the biggest difference right now. Is there is clearly sort of this hole right now, and if you want to fill it, you can. I mean, it's not going to be great content, but there it is. The one thing I'll say I have thought about is maybe some of those sites you could start with generative. When you start getting traffic and you're making enough money, you can then go in and start to edit the most popular ones and make them a little better. I don't know. People are lazy though. Most people are allergic to work, so so I think they will not do that. Like, they might think they will, but then it'll be like, let's not. Let's just keep cashing checks.
Exactly. I think that will probably happen. But I mean, it's a case then of like, you've made your bed now, so I don't believe that's sustainable either. I really don't. So okay. Just also another thing is, with like Google's SEO starter guide set for like a major update, right? As from what I've heard, what are the key changes that you anticipate with this update, and how do you think SEO professionals should prepare for them?
I don't know. I'm probably not the best person to ask on this one. Like, I ignore most of that stuff. I ignore almost all of the EAT guidance. Like, I'm just not a fan of most of that. Like, it's interesting, but it's always kind of, I view it as algorithm for dummies. Whereas I'm more interested in, looking at the patents, looking at really how it's working, what's going on, how would they do that. So I'm more of an information retrieval nerd and NLP nerd, and really figuring out like what are they doing here. And so I think I was a year ahead of when they released BERT. Like, I was like, I think they're using this thing, right? And I think I wrote a post that was like, forget this EAT stuff, let's talk about BERT, right? Like, BERT it's an LLM at the end of the day, in many respects, but it allowed them to understand content better, and you could see it when they started using it. It was like, oh, like, this phrase now is winning because they understand it better, this phrase is not. Like, you could absolutely see it. So I'm much more interested in the details, and thinking more about my MO is, if I'm a Google engineer, how would I solve this? Mm-hmm. Right? And knowing what I know about information retrieval and NLP, how would they solve this? Like, what are the things that they would do to do this? So if they want to get bad health content out of the search results, right? One day those sites woke up and they were gone. They were demoted. And I think it's pretty, for me, it was like, oh, well, they just took the med to vec sort of site stability, and sort of said, here's the vectors for the best medical documents that we know of, right? And then what they did, I believe, is basically said, because let me say vectors are just turning language into numbers, right? Because that's how Google does it. Like, they don't really look at the language, at the words, they turn it into numbers, and these things called vectors or embeddings. And so they took the corpus of like high quality medical content, and then they basically said, let's look at the results and see how far away in distance, in vector distance, that is from our best documents. And if you were too far away, they demoted you, right? Simple, right? I'm pretty sure that's how they did it. I know a lot of people thought that they were like, going in singly and saying like, demote this site, demote that site. They don't do that kind of stuff. So this was just hey, if we know what the best content for health is, and we can express that as data, as numbers, and then we take all of the content that we have and we say, which ones are closer to that. If you're too far away, we're going to get rid of you. That to me is more interesting, right? Like, that's what I like to understand and say, like, okay, how would you do this? How would you, make that change? And instead of talking about, because, you look at those sites and they probably have good EAT, right? Like, it looks like they're experts, and they have authority, and, and some people trust them, like, but that to me is still the standard, is understand how a Google engineer might do this. And that's probably more than a lot of people want. Like, it's dense. Even it's taken me years to sort of get to the point where I feel like I know it enough. But so probably not the right person to ask. I let other people look at those SEO starter guides and other things and talk about them. And I just I look at patents and I look at the research that's coming out and try and follow Googlers and see what they're interested in, which is, tells me a little bit about where things are headed.
Working with large brands, how do you justify the importance of, or the importance and resource cost of SEO implementations? Especially in organizations where, SEO isn't always a top priority.
It's tough. There's some who get it and there's some who don't. Mm-hmm. Most big brands are much more comfortable with paid search and programmatic because it's like, I put X amount of money in and I can see how much money comes out. What's the ROAS, right? Okay, and then they get to SEO and they're like, well, how much money are we spending and how much more are we going to get back? And, some SEOs might just say whatever, but most SEOs are going to tell you, like, not really sure, like, it could be this, it could be that, and very difficult for that company who's used to this, like, what's the in, out, okay, so it is tough. I think there's a little bit of entitlement to SEO traffic a lot of times, and they don't understand. So I often try and just talk about the fact that, it's a zero-sum game. If you're not moving ahead, you're falling behind because someone else is going to move ahead. You don't just inherit, this traffic and keep it. You got to keep working for it. I find it strange that some companies don't have a continually funded SEO program. Sometimes it's like they do it for a couple quarters and then they're like, okay, we're done for a while. I'm like, that's not going to work. Like, and it's also, they want to measure each individual thing. And I try and tell them that's not how SEO works. SEO, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And if you're constantly measuring the parts, you're never going to get to the bigger whole, right? I'll also tell them that SEO math is different. 1 + 1 could equal 0, but 1 + 1 + 1 could equal 12. You just don't know. I can give you probabilities of things that, will work and won't work, but usually I tell them SEO is the opposite of death by 1,000 cuts. It's success through 1,000 optimizations. Yeah, so that's a big one. I have tons of phrases. People treat SEO like they're hunting werewolves, right? They want a silver bullet, and it just doesn't work that way. I think one of my favorite ones is because a lot of people will come to me and say, like, what 3 things can we do? Like, just give me 3 things that'll help us. And I'm like, okay, imagine there's a big jigsaw puzzle and it's 2,000 pieces and you've only got like 500 of them in. And you're asking me which 3 are going to be the most important to complete this puzzle. Doesn't really work that way, folks, right? Like, so there's no magic bullet. What I will say, one of the things I've had success with is a lot of engineering teams and a lot of companies are point stories, for their engineering teams using agile methods, right? And they say this is a 1-point story, 3.5, whatever. And what I've done with a couple companies, and it seems to have worked, is to tell them that you have to have at least 30 points worth of SEO work every quarter to actually move the ball forward and not lose momentum. And so I'll go through and I'll point the SEO stories and just do it that way. And that seems to work for a lot of organizations because they're used to this idea of how much effort does it take to do these things, and resource wise, and then showing okay, this is the SEO effort, and if you're not doing work against it, enough work, you're just not going to survive. You're not going to move forward. That has been effective with a couple of companies in sort of understanding and saying okay, we got to get to 30 this quarter. What are we doing? So I think that's been the one trick that I've used recently in the last 2 years that has turned the corner with a couple of brands. The other one also, I will say, is to convince people to stop doing as much testing and A/B testing and just do more. It's about throughput. Doing more is a lot more important than measuring whether or not, I've had people it's only a 2% gain, so maybe we won't launch it. And I'm like, what? That's not how it works, right? So it's tough. I won't say that. I know other colleagues are probably better at the politics of cozying up. Now I'm a consultant, so it's a little more difficult for me to do that. And I am also just don't have the personality or the patience for it either.
I mean, if we're not going to be telling, especially as a consultant, if you're not going to be telling the truth, what are you doing? Okay, so for a client with a large site and that has numerous amounts of SEO fixes that are needed, how do you go about prioritizing, these activities? Can you say what it is that you would focus on first?
I do sort of Maslow's hierarchy of SEO, which technical SEO is at the bottom. It's sort of if your technical stuff is not good, you can't do the other stuff, right? It's the base of the pyramid. And so I will usually go in, particularly for large sites, where it's you've got millions or billions of URLs, and it's we need the crawl efficiency to be better, right? We need Google to crawl and not find a bunch of junk. And so we work first on that. Then we'll move on to the next level, which is sort of usually on page, and saying, let's look at the page types and let's tweak these and make sure. Sometimes that on page stuff, I remember one client, they had no crosslinks, 0. And so I immediately was you need to have crosslinks on these pages. And they're like, well, we need to test that and see if users like it. And I was like, what? Literally, people would land on this thing, and I'm not going to say what it is. And I was like, you don't think that maybe if they don't like that, they want to see the other options available? That's just, you just missed it. This is not a testable thing. This is just, you botched it, right? But they were like, no, we're going to test it. And they tested it, and of course it did well. But so there's things like that sometimes where you'll walk in and you'll just be like, well, okay, this is wrong. You need to fix that. I find title tags is usually next on the menu right after that. People have hard times with title tags for some reason. But I think if you start thinking about it from the user standpoint, it becomes a lot easier. It's sort of what's the dominant query syntax that brings people to this page? That's your title. It's not super tough in my opinion, but it does force you to really understand your user, right? You need to know what are they searching? How are they searching? I'll never forget someone wound up on my blog with the term how to change the text in the blue link on Google. All right, so clearly a novice, but literally they were asking about title tags, right? And so you really need to understand how the user is searching for this stuff, not how you are. So I would say technical first, on-page content second, and then after that, probably new page types. So finding like, okay, what are you missing that we can fill in and do it that way? And that's really the next step. That next step is usually the last one because it's also the one that's more resource intensive, right? You got to get new pages, and it needs design, and then you need to figure out how to link to those things and get cross-linking going. So I think that would probably be the order of operations.
I just have one more question for you, though. Okay, if you could go back to the very start of your career, what advice would you give yourself?
I will say the one thing that I've learned, one of the things that I've learned is that it is often, and it's not bad, but it's just what it is. It's often not what you know; it's who you know that will allow you to sort of gain access and to help people. And so, I am not a natural extrovert. I'm actually an introvert, and so that was definitely difficult for me to like understand and reach out. But it, for whatever reason, in my business, I've always been able to do that. Like I'm the person who, you know, some big mucky muck does a presentation and it's got his email address on it, and I actually did this just a couple months ago, and so I just emailed him. I was like, hey, and the thing is, most people email you back, right? And I think that would be one. The other one I would say for myself, and I always have to, two things that I have to remind myself: continue to take risks. So don't, you know, you get comfortable and then you're like, you know, but continue to take risks, and to always tell myself that it always takes longer than you think. That I always have to remind myself of that. So it took longer to build the business to where I wanted it to be, but it also takes longer to do any amount of work. You're just, oh, I'm going to bang that out. And nope. Like you think it's going to be an hour. That's actually 3 hours. Right. So it's definitely that. But I don't have a ton that I would give out to my old self, because I think I did conquer some of the fears that I had. Did not want to do public speaking, but did it and did it pretty well, I think. So not a ton, but a lot of advice I would say to give or during my journey, which is you know, be generous with your content, be generous to people. You know, don't be afraid, take those risks, and just remain confident, I think, is the other one. That there are times where you know, you'll sit there and you'll look and you'll be like, am I doing this right? Like, you know, do I just have imposter syndrome? Like, what's going on here? But remain confident. You know, you just gotta trust that you have it, and that you're gonna figure a way out of it.
Amazing. That's very, very good advice. And actually, I need to tell myself that too. Maybe I can go back in time and tell younger me that. AJ, again, thank you so much for joining us today, and for giving us so much of your time. Really, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, really, really fun.
And that's a wrap on our insightful conversation with AJ Kohn. If you're looking for an exceptional digital agency's expertise, look no further than DesignRush.com/marketplace. Here you'll find a wide selection of agencies expertly equipped to bring your vision to life, whether it's in digital marketing, web design, or any other speciality. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more valuable discussions with industry experts and thought leaders. Again, I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Stay curious and join us for the next episode.